Park walked into the largest room he had ever seen. The ceiling was so high that clouds formed near the top. The walls were made of black stone that seemed to drink the light, and everywhere he looked, there were giants. They stood on 8 legs, each one as thick as a tree trunk. Their bodies were covered in hard shells the color of dried blood. They clicked their jaws together when they saw him, making sounds that his translator turned into laughter. They floated in the air like living crystals. Light passed through their bodies and broke into rainbows. They hummed and sang in frequencies that hurt his ears, even with the translator working to soften the sound. And then there were had read about them. Everyone on Earth had. They were the apex predators of the known galaxy. They had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had destroyed species that no longer existed. They were what Earth mythology might have called dragons if dragons were real and stood 6 meters tall. Their leader, High Chieftain, sat on a throne carved from the bones of his enemies. His scales were black as space itself. His eyes glowed gold like twin suns. When he breathed, smoke curled from his nostrils. Was the only human in the room. He was also the smallest living thing in the room. At 172 centimeters tall, he barely reached the knee of the shortest alien present. He was terrified, but he did not let it show. This was the Galactic Council. These were the beings who decided which species mattered and which species did not. For 300 years, humanity had been traveling among the stars, building colonies, making contact with other civilizations. And for 300 years, the Council had ignored them. Until now, had been chosen to change that. He was Earth's first official ambassador to the Outer Rim Council. His job was simple: convince these ancient, powerful beings that humanity deserved a seat at their table. Looking at the giants around him, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. So, rumbled, his voice so deep that felt it in his bones, the humans have finally come to beg. I am not here to beg, said. His voice sounded small in the vast chamber, but he kept it steady. I am here to introduce my species. I leaned forward, its many eyes examining him like he was an insect. We know about humans. You are fragile, soft-skinned. You break easily. You live such short lives, and added, its crystalline body flickering with light. What are you? 80 years, 90. We have memories older than your entire civilization. And you are so small, another said, clicking its jaws in amusement. The children of our species are larger than your adults. Listened to all of this without flinching. He had expected it. The briefing documents had warned him that the Council viewed humanity as barely worth noticing. They saw humans the way humans might see ants, busy, numerous, but ultimately unimportant. Rose from his throne. The movement was slow and deliberate, like a mountain deciding to walk. Each step he took shook the floor. He crossed the chamber until he stood directly in front of, blocking out the light. Up close, could see the scars that covered this body. Each one told a story of battle, of conquest, of survival. Had lived for 800 years. He had killed more beings than could count. He was the most dangerous creature in the known galaxy. And he was looking at the way a cat looks at a mouse. Tell me, small one said, lowering his massive head until his golden eyes were level with his face. Why should we care about your species? You have nothing we want. You have nothing we need. You are weak, short-lived, and frankly, quite boring. His heart was beating so fast he thought it might burst, but he had prepared for this moment. He had spent years preparing for this moment. You are right, he said. We are weak, we are short-lived, we are small. The aliens murmured in surprise. They had not expected him to agree. But that is exactly why you should listen to us, continued. We are weak, so we learn to think. We are short-lived, so we learn to teach our children everything we know before we die. We are small, so we learn to work together. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. With a press of a button, images appeared in the air around him. Images of Earth, images of humanity. "This is what we have done with our short lives," he said. "We have cured diseases that killed millions. We have built cities that touch the sky. We have sent ships to other stars. We have done all of this in just 300 years of space travel." He looked up meeting those golden eyes without fear. "You have lived for 800 years, he said. "That is impressive, but in 800 years you have stayed the same. In 300 years we have changed everything. Imagine what we could do if we had the time you have. Imagine what we could teach you about living fully, about making every moment count." The chamber was silent. The giants stared at the small human who spoke to them without trembling, who challenged them without weapons, who stood alone among predators and did not run. His eyes narrowed. For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly, the corners of his mouth pulled back to reveal fangs as long as swords. He was smiling. "You have courage, little one," he said. "I will give you that. Very well. The council will hear your case, but words alone will not be enough. If humanity wants a place among us, you will have to prove your worth." Hal asked. Smile widened. "3 trials," he said. "Pass them and humanity will be considered. Fail them." He let the word hang in the air like a death sentence. Swallowed hard, but he nodded. "I accept," he said. And with those 2 words, he changed the fate of his species forever. The first trial was called the Trial of Endurance. The council dropped on a planet called Prime. It was a death world, a place where they sent their warriors to train. The air was thick with poison. The ground was covered with sharp rocks. The creatures that lived there were all hungry, all deadly, and all very interested in the small human who had just arrived. They gave him a knife, a bottle of water, and nothing else. "Survive for 1 week," the commander told him through a communication device. "If you are still alive when we return, you pass the first trial." Then they left. Stood alone on the red sand and looked at his supplies. 1 knife, 1 bottle of water, 7 days to survive. He started walking. The first day was the hardest. He had to find shelter before the sun set, because the night predators on Prime were worse than the day predators. He found a cave in a cliff face and blocked the entrance with rocks. That night, he listened to things scratch at his barricade and growl in frustration. He did not sleep. The second day, he found water, a small stream hidden between 2 hills. He boiled it using a fire he made by rubbing sticks together, the way his grandfather had taught him when he was a boy. The water tasted like metal, but it kept him alive. On the 3rd day, he killed his first predator. It was a creature with 6 legs and teeth like needles. It attacked him while he was gathering food. He fought back with his knife, stabbing and cutting until the thing stopped moving. Then he ate it. On the 4th day, he built a better shelter, walls of stone and mud, a door that could be locked from inside, a fire pit that kept him warm through the freezing nights. On the 5th day, something strange happened. 2 of the 6-legged predators followed him back to his shelter, but they did not attack. They simply watched him, their heads tilted to the side like curious dogs, threw them some meat from his last kill. They ate it, and then they stayed. By the 6th day, the predators were sleeping at the entrance to his shelter, guarding him from other threats. Had named them, and he did not know if they were male or female, but he talked to them anyway. It made him feel less alone. On the 7th day, the council returned. They found sitting outside his shelter, cooking meat over a fire, with 2 deadly predators lying at his feet like loyal pets. He had mapped 17 kilometers of the surrounding terrain. He had found 3 sources of clean water. He had identified 12 plants that were safe to eat. He had not just survived, he had thrived. The commander stared at him in disbelief. "How?" she demanded. "This planet has killed warriors twice your size. How are you still alive?" Smiled. "Humans are stubborn," he said. "We do not know how to give up." Back on the council station, Doctor explained it better. She was one of Earth's top scientists, and she had been watching his trial through hidden cameras. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters," she told the council. "We are not the fastest species on our planet, we are not the strongest, but we can keep going long after other creatures have stopped. We can walk and run for days without rest. We can adapt to any environment. We can eat almost anything. We can survive almost anywhere." She paused and looked at the giants around her. "Your warriors are impressive," she said, "but they are designed for short bursts of violence. Humans are designed for the long game. We will keep coming, keep trying, keep surviving, long after everyone else has given up." The council was silent. They had not expected the small human to pass the first trial. They had certainly not expected him to do it so well. The second trial was called the Trial of Mind. It presented humanity with a mathematical equation. It was written in light, floating in the air like a living thing. The symbols twisted and changed as watched, forming patterns that hurt his eyes to look at. "This equation has puzzled our greatest minds for 10,000 years, and said, 'Solve it, and you pass the second trial.'" Looked at the equation. He understood none of it. He was a diplomat, not a mathematician. "How long do I have?" he asked. "1 year," they replied. "After that we will assume you have failed." Nodded, then he did something the council did not expect. He sent the equation to Earth. Within hours, every mathematician on the planet was working on it. Universities shared data with each other. Rivals became partners. Old scientists worked beside young students. The entire intellectual power of humanity focused on one single problem. They argued, they failed, they tried again, they failed again. They shared their failures with each other and learned from them. 6 months later, a team led by Professor Bay at the Seoul Institute of Theoretical Physics found the answer. Not through genius, but through cooperation. Thousands of human minds had worked together, building on each other's mistakes until they found the truth. When presented the solution to they were stunned. "You did not solve this alone," one observed, its crystalline body flickering with confusion. "No," agreed, "I solved it with my people." "But why? Why would others help you? What did you offer them in return?" Smiled, "Nothing. They helped because we asked, because we are human, because that is what we do." They looked at each other. They had lived for millions of years. They had collected knowledge that would fill 1,000 libraries. But they had never thought to share it freely, to build on each other's work, to stand on the shoulders of those who came before. This small human had just taught them something new. "You passed the second trial," they said softly. Only the trial of spirit remained. It was the simplest trial and the most deadly. Would be hunted by a warrior. If he survived for 1 hour, humanity would pass. If he died, humanity would be forgotten. The warrior chosen to hunt him was the son of High Chieftain himself. He was young, eager, and absolutely deadly. His claws could tear through metal. His teeth could crush bone. He had killed his first enemy at the age of 10 and had not stopped killing since. Was given no weapons. The arena was a maze of stone walls and dark corridors. Somewhere in that maze was waiting. The hunt began. Did not run. He did not hide. Instead, he walked calmly through the maze until he found an open space in the center. Then he sat down. When found him, the young was confused. His prey was not running. His prey was not screaming. His prey was just sitting there waiting. "What are you doing?" demanded. "Waiting for you," said. "I want to talk." "Talk," laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. "I am here to kill you." "I know," said, "but I do not think you want to." For the next 50 minutes they talked, asked about culture, their poetry, their songs. Despite himself, began to answer. He talked about his mother who had died in battle when he was young. He talked about his father's expectations, heavy as mountains. He talked about his dreams of being more than just a killer. When the hour ended, stood before his father in the council chamber. "The human is still alive," observed. "Why?" looked at the small human who had faced him without fear, who had treated him not as a predator, but as a person. "Because he is not prey," said, "he is something else, something I do not have a word for." His golden eyes moved too. "You have passed all 3 trials," he said slowly. "Humanity will be considered." But could tell from the look in the High Chieftain's eyes that something had changed, something important, something that would take time to understand. 6 months after humanity passed the trials, the galaxy fell silent. It started at the edge of known space. A small colony stopped sending messages, then another, then another. Within weeks, an entire sector had gone dark. Ships sent to investigate never returned. The council called an emergency meeting. Sat in his new seat, the small chair that had been built just for him. Around him, the giants of the galaxy were afraid. He could see it in the way the shifted on their legs, in the way the flickered with unstable light, in the way even's golden eyes had lost some of their fire. "They have returned," said, his voice heavy with something had never heard from him before. Dread. "Who?" asked. The words sent a shiver through the chamber. They were a legend, a nightmare, a story that parents told children to make them behave. They had swept through the galaxy millions of years ago, consuming everything in their path. Then, for reasons no one understood, they had vanished into the void between galaxies. Now they were back. Watched the war unfold over the next few months. It was a slaughter. They came in ships that were black as death itself. They did not speak. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They simply consumed. Entire planets were stripped bare, their populations vanishing without a trace. The Council's fleets met them in battle and were destroyed. The mighty warriors who had never known defeat fell by the thousands. This beautiful crystal ships shattered like glass against the enemy hulls. Even the apex predators of the known galaxy could not stop the tide. Called another meeting. This time there were empty seats. Species that had existed for millions of years were simply gone. "We cannot win," admitted. His voice was tired, broken. "For every ship we destroy, 10 more appear. They are endless. We are not." The chamber was silent. The greatest powers in the galaxy had accepted defeat. Then Admiral stood up. She was a small woman, even by human standards. Her hair was gray, her face lined with age. She had commanded Earth's fleet for 30 years, fighting pirates and protecting colonies. She had never faced anything like the. But she was not afraid. "Let us help," she said. The giants looked at her with something between pity and annoyance. The commander clicked his jaws in that dismissive way had come to hate. "Your fleet is tiny," the commander said. "What can you possibly do that we cannot?" Admiral smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "We can think differently," she said. Over the next few weeks, humanity went to work. Captain led a team of soldiers into a hive ship. The council thought it was a suicide mission. They expected him to destroy the ship from the inside. Instead, he captured it. His team fought through corridors filled with drones, losing half their number in the process. But they reached the command center. They took control. And then they flew the ship back to council space. The scientists on board studied the vessel day and night. Within 72 hours, they had mapped this navigation system. For the first time, the council knew where the enemy was going before they arrived. Dr. Shin, from, made the next breakthrough. She discovered that they communicated through a specific frequency, a quantum signal that connected all their ships and drones together. The council wanted to block the signal, to cut off this coordination. Had a better idea. She learned to speak it. Within weeks, she was feeding false information into the network. She sent ships to locations that did not exist. She made them believe that empty sectors were filled with defenders. She turned their greatest strength, their perfect coordination, into chaos. But the biggest change came from Lieutenant. She was a communications officer, young and inexperienced. She had joined the fleet because she wanted to see the stars, not because she wanted to fight. But while everyone else was looking for ways to kill she was looking for something else. A way to talk to them. She studied everything the scientists had learned about She analyzed their communication patterns, their movement behaviors, the sounds they made when they consumed a world. And she realized something that changed everything. They are not a hive mind, she told the council. They are a species, a traumatized, terrified species. They are running from something out there in the void, something that scared them so badly that they have been fleeing for millions of years. The council did not understand. How does this help us? Demanded. Took a deep breath, because I think I can talk to them. She broadcast a message into the network. Not words, because they did not use words. She sent music, human music, songs of loss, of grief, of survival, songs that spoke of pain and fear and the desperate hope for something better. They stopped. Their black ships hung motionless in space. Their attacks halted. For the first time in recorded history, they were listening. Sent more music. She sent images of Earth, of humans rebuilding after disasters, of children playing in the ruins of cities that had been destroyed and rebuilt. She showed them what it meant to survive, not by consuming but by healing. Days passed, then weeks. And then they did something that no one had ever seen before. They retreated. Not in defeat, but in consideration. They pulled back from council space and waited, their ships forming a vast wall at the edge of the galaxy. They wanted to talk. Admiral sent as humanity's representative. She went alone, in a tiny ship, to meet with beings that had destroyed civilizations. The council thought she was going to die. She came back 3 months later with a treaty. They were not monsters. They were refugees, survivors of a war that had happened so long ago that even they barely remembered it. They had been running ever since, consuming because they did not know any other way to survive. Taught them another way. She showed them that they could coexist, that they could build instead of destroy, that they could heal instead of hurt. It took time. It took patience. It took a kind of empathy that the council had never thought possible. But in the end, the war ended not with annihilation, but with understanding. Humanity had done what the greatest powers in the galaxy could not. They had stopped not with strength, not with weapons, not with superior numbers. With music, with empathy, with hope. When returned to the council chamber, the giants looked at her differently. They looked at all the humans differently. Rose from his throne and crossed the chamber to where was standing. You were right, the High Chieftain said, his voice soft. We underestimated your species. Shook his head. We just did what humans do, he said. We survived, we adapted, we found another way. His golden eyes studied him for a long moment. Yes, he said finally, you did. And in his voice, heard something he had never heard before. Respect. The war had been over for 3 months, but the galaxy was still healing. Worlds that had been stripped bare by the were slowly being restored. Species that had lost their homes were being given new ones. They themselves had retreated to a distant sector, learning to farm instead of consume, guided by human teachers who had volunteered for the mission. And in the great council chamber, things were changing. Stood before the assembled species once more, but this time he was not alone. Behind him stood representatives from 17 human nations, scientists, soldiers, artists, philosophers, teachers, doctors, the full power of what humanity could offer. The giants looked at them with new eyes. We have gathered to discuss humanity's permanent status in the council, the commander announced. Her voice was different now, lacking the dismissive tone that had marked their first meeting. All species will have a chance to speak. One by one, the great powers of the galaxy gave their opinions. They spoke first. Their forms glowed with warm light as they described what human scientists had taught them about cooperation, about building on the failures of others instead of hiding them. "They have shown us that knowledge shared is knowledge," the lead said. "We have learned more from humans in 1 year than we learned on our own in 10,000. The spoke next. Their commander, the same one who had laughed at on his first day, now spoke with a different voice. "We thought strength was the only thing that mattered," she said. "Humans taught us that true strength is not just in the body, but in the mind and the heart. Their warriors fight not because they do not fear death, but because they have something worth dying for." Other species added their voices. The praised human art, which had inspired a renaissance in their culture. The aquatic thanked human doctors for developing a cure for a disease that had plagued their species for centuries. The silicon-based expressed wonder at human music, which had touched something in their mineral souls that they had not known existed. Through it all, listened in amazement. These were the giants who had looked down on humanity, who had called them small, fragile, and worthless. Now they were speaking of humans as if they were something special. Finally rose from his throne. The chamber fell silent. The high chieftain of the was the most powerful being in the galaxy. His word carried more weight than all the others combined. Whatever he said would decide humanity's fate. He walked slowly across the chamber. Each step was deliberate, heavy with 800 years of life and experience. The floor shook beneath his massive feet. His black scales absorbed the light around him. His golden eyes burned like twin suns. He stopped directly in front of. The human had to crane his neck to look up at him. Even after everything that had happened, the size difference was still overwhelming. Could crush him with one hand. He could eat him in one bite. He was the apex predator and was the smallest being in the room. But did not look away. Lowered his massive head until they were almost eye to eye. His breath was hot, smelling of smoke and something older, something ancient. "I have lived for 800 years, said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "I have conquered worlds that your species cannot pronounce. I have broken fleets that filled the sky from horizon to horizon. I have killed more beings than your entire civilization has produced in its history." Said nothing, he just waited. "I have seen species rise and fall," continued. "I have watched empires crumble into dust. I have witnessed the birth and death of stars. I thought I had seen everything the universe had to offer." He paused and something changed in his golden eyes. Something softened. "I was wrong." Reached out with one massive clawed hand. Forced himself not to flinch as those claws, each one as long as his forearm, came toward him. But instead of violence, the placed his hand gently on shoulder. Among the new, this gesture was reserved for family. "You humans confuse me," admitted. "You are small. A child is larger than your greatest warriors. You are fragile. Our claws could tear through your bodies like paper. You live such short lives that by our standards, you are already dying from the moment you are born." His grip tightened slightly, not painfully but firmly. "But you do not let any of this stop you. You love fiercely because your time is short. You build monuments because you know you will not live to see them crumble. You fight for a future you will never experience. You die for children you will never meet." His voice grew softer still, filled with an emotion that the rarely showed. "When my son sat with you in that arena, he told me you were not prey. At the time, I did not understand. Now I do. You are not prey. You are not predators. You are something we have no word for in our language." He straightened to his full height, but kept his hand on shoulder. "We are called the apex predators of the galaxy," he said, his voice now carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "We are strong. We are deadly. We are feared. But strength without wisdom is just violence. Power without purpose is just destruction." He looked around at the assembled species, at the giants who ruled the galaxy. "Humans have taught us something we had forgotten, that the smallest flame can light the darkest void, that the briefest life can change eternity, that the gentlest heart can tame the fiercest predator. He looked back down at. From this day forward, the name humanity as kin, not allies, not servants, not junior partners, brothers and sisters. You will sit beside us, not beneath us. Your voice will carry the same weight as ours. Your people will be protected as our people. The chamber erupted in murmurs of shock. They had never named anyone as kin before. In 800,000 years of their history, they had always stood alone at the top. Until now. Waited for the noise to die down. Then he looked at once more, and the ancient predator's face softened into something almost like a smile. "Little brother," he said, "welcome to the family." Felt tears prick at his eyes. He was a diplomat. He was trained to control his emotions. But this moment was too big, too important, too overwhelming. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Heard him anyway. Those golden eyes, which had seen the death of stars and the birth of civilizations, looked at him with warmth. "No," said, "thank you, for reminding an old predator that there is more to life than hunting, for showing me that strength is not the only thing that matters, for being exactly what you are." He squeezed the shoulder once more, gently. "Small," he said, "but never insignificant." Behind, the human delegation stood in stunned silence. Scientists who had spent their lives studying the stars, soldiers who had fought in the darkest battles, artists who had created beauty from nothing. All of them watched as the most powerful being in the galaxy embraced their representative as family. Admiral was crying openly. Doctor was smiling so wide it looked like it hurt. Lieutenant, who had stopped a war with music, was laughing and sobbing at the same time. They had come to the stars as strangers. They had been dismissed as insignificant. Now they were family. And the galaxy would never be the same. 50 years had passed since called humanity his little brothers. The galaxy was a different place now. On 100 worlds, human teachers worked beside warriors, teaching them that strength could protect as well as destroy. Human artists collaborated with philosophers, creating works of beauty that combined crystal light with human emotion. Human doctors developed treatments for diseases that had plagued alien species for thousands of years. The once the terror of the galaxy now lived peacefully in their own sector. They had learned to farm, to build, to create instead of consume. Human ambassadors visited them regularly, sharing music and stories and the simple truth that survival did not require destruction. And on the something unprecedented was about to happen. Park stood at the entrance to the Hall of Ancestors. She was 25 years old, tall for a human woman, with her grandfather's steady eyes and her grandmother's gentle smile. She wore traditional ceremonial robes, adjusted to fit her small frame. Behind her, a crowd had gathered. Humans and stood together, their size difference as dramatic as ever but their connection obvious. They had come to witness history. The Hall of Ancestors was the most sacred place on the. For 30,000 years, only blood had walked its stone floors. The walls were covered with carvings that told the history of the species, from their first hunts to their conquest of the stars. Today, new carvings had been added. Could see them as she walked through the vast hall. Scenes of human and fighting side by side against the. Small hands held in massive claws. Children of two worlds playing together beneath alien stars. Her grandfather, Park, sitting across from the young in that arena so many years ago. At the end of the hall, waited. He was ancient now, even by standards. His scales had faded from pure black to a deep gray. His movements were slower, more careful. The fire in his golden eyes had dimmed to a warm glow. But when he saw, he smiled. The same smile he had given her grandfather all those years ago. "You look like him," said as she approached. "The same eyes, the same stubborn set to your jaw." "I learned from the best," replied. Chuckled a sound like rolling stones. "Yes, you did. was the most stubborn being I ever met, including myself, and that is saying something. He reached down and picked up a ceremonial blade from the altar before him. It was ancient, older than human civilization, its edge still sharp enough to cut through steel. "Your grandfather changed this galaxy," said, placing the blade in her hands. "Not through force, not through conquest, through simply being who he was, small, fragile, short-lived, and absolutely unwilling to give up." Around them, the warriors who had gathered bowed their massive heads. This was a ceremony of adoption, of officially welcoming someone into the clan. It had been performed thousands of times over but never for a human, never for someone who was not by blood. Until today. "We live long lives," continued, his voice carrying through the ancient hall. "We remember much. We have seen empires rise and fall, stars born and die, species evolve and go extinct. We thought we knew everything there was to know about the universe." He placed his massive hand on his head, the same gesture he had used with her grandfather 50 years ago. "Your grandfather taught us that we were wrong. He taught us that it is not how long you live that matters, but how deeply. He taught us that the smallest flame can light the darkest void. He taught us that family is not about blood, but about love." Felt tears streaming down her face. She did not try to stop them. "My grandfather told me something before he died," she said. "He told me that when you called him little brother, it was the greatest honor he ever received." His golden eyes softened. "It was not an honor I gave. It was a truth I recognized. Your grandfather was my brother in every way that mattered, not because of strength or size but because of who he was." He smiled down at her. "And you are his granddaughter, which makes you my family too." The warriors raised their heads and let out a sound that shook the walls. It was a cry of welcome, of acceptance, of joy. For the first time in 30,000 years, a non was being officially adopted into their clan. Waited for the sound to fade, then spoke again. "You humans are small," he said, "but you make the universe larger. You are brief, but you make existence richer. You are fragile, but you make the strong remember why strength matters." He leaned down until his ancient face was level with hers. "Little sister," he said, "you have made this old predator believe in tomorrow again." Reached up and placed her small hand against his massive jaw. It was a gesture of affection, of connection, of family. "Thank you," she said, "for giving my grandfather a home among the stars, for showing him that small does not mean insignificant, for being his brother when the rest of the galaxy saw him as nothing." His eyes glittered with something that might have been tears, if could cry. "He gave me more than I gave him," said. "He reminded me that the universe is full of wonders, and that sometimes the greatest wonders come in the smallest packages." The ceremony continued, ancient words spoken in the tongue, oaths exchanged, bonds formed. When it was over, walked out of the Hall of Ancestors as something new, the first human to be officially recognized as kin. Outside, the crowd was waiting. Humans and stood together, cheering, celebrating. Saw faces from dozens of worlds, species that had once looked down on humanity now standing beside them as equals, as friends, as family. Her mother Park was there, crying and laughing at the same time. Her brother Park was trying to look dignified and failing completely. Her friends from the academy, her colleagues from the diplomatic corps, her teachers and mentors, and everyone who had helped her reach this moment. And above them all, carved into the entrance of the Hall of Ancestors, were new words in both script and human Korean. From the smallest, the greatest light. It was the phrase that had come to define humanity's place in the galaxy, not the strongest, not the oldest, not the largest, but the most creative, the most adaptable, the most stubbornly, wonderfully, impossibly alive. Looked up at the words and thought of her grandfather. He had come to this galaxy as a small man in a room full of giants. He had been dismissed, mocked, and underestimated at every turn. But he had never given up. He had never stopped trying. He had never stopped believing that humans had something to offer, something unique, something precious. And he had been right. Humanity was the smallest species in the room. They always had been and they always would be. But that had never mattered. Because it was not about size, it was not about strength, it was not about how long you lived. It was about how brightly you burned. And humanity burned brighter than any star in the sky. Little brothers, little sisters, small, fragile, brief, and absolutely essential. That was their legacy. That was their gift to the universe. And it would shine forever.